All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Star Wars Mark of Balance. My name is Mark, and today I'm giving you my way too late recap of Star Wars Celebration 2025. It took place in Japan back in April. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it. I haven't made the past two celebrations because they've been international. When they first announced that Celebration would be in Japan in 2025, I was really excited because I thought it would be the perfect excuse to finally make my trip out to Japan, and I would get a Star Wars Celebration in, but I'd also be able to finally see this beautiful country that I want to visit so badly. Fortunately, the next Star Wars Celebration will be back here in the States in LA in 2027, and I will finally be making my return after, at that point, it'll be almost 5 years since my last celebration in Anaheim in 2022, I think it was. So very hopeful that I can make the next celebration and bring you guys along with me. Hopefully bring a couple friends that haven't been to Star Wars Celebration before to experience how great this convention is. Now, before I get into the announcements, I do want to say up front that Star Wars Celebration is such a great reminder of why we all love Star Wars and that we can all love different aspects of Star Wars and still come together as a community to celebrate our shared love of this franchise. I know there's a lot of back and forth online between Star Wars fans. I know there's a lot of claims of toxicity about the Star Wars fandom from people who aren't in the fandom and they just want to score some social credibility. But when you step inside the convention center at Star Wars Celebration and you see all the beautiful fan-made art, you see all of these vendors who are doing Star Wars themed tattoos, they're selling their own merchandise, they're doing art, as I mentioned. There's all these small sectors of Star Wars fans who go to these very niche panels that only talk about this one thing they love in Star Wars, like Star Wars Lego or tabletop games or card games or all of these different pieces of the Star Wars fandom that you wouldn't know about unless you step foot inside Celebration. And I just want to, again, say that Star Wars Celebration is just such a great palate cleanser for all of us. And I always feel a rejuvenation of my love for Star Wars when I watch the coverage of Celebration and see all the interviews with the creators and see the panels and see all the fans dressed up in their cosplay. It's just so refreshing, and I think it's just such a great reminder for all of us that we love Star Wars. Let's remember that, and that's what's most important. Now, getting into the announcements themselves, this was a very interesting year at Celebration, and I mean that in a good way because there was a lot of unexpected things that got me excited for the future of Star Wars. Now, of course, under Disney, I always approach Star Wars with a cautious optimism because I've been excited for things before and they've let me down, and it's been persistent, and Disney has proven that they are not consistent with making good Star Wars. But I think a lot of the things that they've shown that are on the horizon, like Starfighter with Shawn, Levy, and Ryan Gosling, I still can't believe that Ryan Gosling will be leading a Star Wars movie. And then in the animated space, between Visions having a short-form series being released around the Ninth Jedi, and then also Maul Shadow Lord, which was a direction that I did not think they would take with the next animated show. And I also think the lack of announcements in the live-action TV space is a good thing. I know the point of Celebration is to have all these really cool big announcements, but I think the restraint here of not greenlighting more live-action TV shows after the rocky road we've had is a very smart decision. The only live-action TV show that we got information on was Ahsoka Season 2, and it was more of a retrospective on Season 1 and less about the future of Season 2. There's definitely some tidbits of knowledge that we got that I'll get into, but overall, I think this was a very concise and focused Star Wars Celebration with announcements that I'm really excited to get into. I do have my reservations, but I'll get into all that when we go one by one through these announcements. Now let's start with the biggest surprise of the show for me, which was the official announcement of Star Wars Starfighter from Shawn Levy, led by Ryan Gosling, coming out in 2027. Ryan Gosling is one of my favorite actors, if not my favorite actor, because I believe he is a chameleon. He can do every type of role. I know recently he's been really leaning hard into his comedic side, but of course his dramatic side is what got him on the map. And I love Nice Guys, which was his first big foray into comedy, and I think a lot of people underrated that movie, but me and my sister absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite movies. So when the rumors started circulating that he would be the leading man in a Star Wars movie, I simply couldn't bring myself to believe that. One, because most of the announcements around Star Wars movies never come to fruition, and the other is that it's freaking Ryan Gosling. So you can imagine the out-of-body experience I had when Shawn Levy announced Ryan Gosling out to the Star Wars Celebration stage, a stage that I absolutely love and never thought I would see this man appear on. And then later, being on the Star Wars live stage, having this interview with Shawn Levy and the typical interviewers that they have for those live streams, I was just like, this is real. Ryan is here. He is talking Star Wars. He is going to be talking about Star Wars for the next couple years, and his press run for Star Wars Starfighter is going to be generational. All of those interviews are going to be so fantastic. Now, I know a lot of you longtime listeners are rolling your eyes and saying, Mark, you're a hypocrite. You said you don't like A-list actors in Star Wars because it breaks the immersion. And you're absolutely right. And I'm going to own my hypocrisy here because I think Ryan is a good enough actor to prove me wrong. I still stand on the idea that there is something special about stage actors or unknown actors being in the Star Wars universe because they really do blend into the universe and you feel like you're really immersed in another world where you don't know them or their past work, so it feels like they are truly embodying that character. I can understand that people will see Ryan Gosling in Star Wars and be like, oh, that's going to take me out of it. I'm just going to think it's Ryan Gosling. But I truly do think he has the acting chops to prove me and a lot of other people wrong. We don't know much about the film, obviously. It does go into production at the end of this year in the fall. We know that it takes place 5 years after Rise of Skywalker, and we know that it is a standalone movie with all new original characters. I don't fully believe that because it is so close to Rise of Skywalker. I can't imagine Disney not wanting them to tie it in to some degree. I hope they don't. I hope Shawn Levy is left alone and is able to tell whatever story he wants because I think the canon, and specifically the canon around the sequels, is the only thing that could really hold this movie back. The other thing I'm cautious about with this movie is the overuse of comedy, and that's really stemming from the fact that Shawn Levy is the writer and director of the film. Now, Shawn Levy is obviously a very talented director and writer. He has a lot of heartfelt comedic movies under his belt, and I think he could bring that same energy to the Star Wars galaxy. And the way he talked about the film on stage at Star Wars Celebration was so enthusiastic. It seemed like he really believed in the story that he was telling, and that gets me excited all on its own. But I do think he has a tendency to overuse comedy in his films to the detriment of the emotional moments in those films. Now, that could also stem from the fact that most of his recent projects do involve Ryan Reynolds, and that is definitely his style of comedy. But I do think in this age of Marvel-esque humor being injected into almost every big-budget film, that there really is a potential for this movie to suffer in those moments and really take us out of the Star Wars universe. We saw it in The Last Jedi, and while I'll defend Last Jedi on a couple points, I cannot defend the humor in that movie because it feels so out of place. It completely ruins some of the scenes that it's injected into, and I'm just worried that it might pop up again in this film, especially with Shawn Levy directing. We obviously know very little about this movie, so this is just my way too early to say concerns about this movie moving forward. But overall, I am extremely excited because I do think this combo of Ryan Gosling and Shawn Levy can deliver a very heartfelt, fun adventure in the Star Wars galaxy with the perfect sprinkling of humor to earn back the trust of longtime fans and also bring a breath of fresh air into the Star Wars galaxy with a standalone story with brand new characters into the movie theaters again, because it's been a very long time since Star Wars has not only been in the movie theaters, but has also done so with brand new characters in a whole new era of the universe. The last thing I'll discuss that's related to this movie announcement is that it's very telling that the Rey movie was not mentioned at all during this. If you remember when the 3 Star Wars movies were announced at the last celebration, the Rey movie was marketed to be the next Star Wars film in theaters and has now been jumped ahead by The Mandalorian and Grogu and a movie that didn't even exist at the time of its announcement with Shawn Levy's Starfighter. The Rey movie has had a new writer every year, and they've dropped off so much writing talent from the script that it's hard to keep up with. And there was never really a demand for it. I know some people will tell you that there's a big demand for a Rey movie and the continuation of the sequels, but there isn't. And a lot of Star Wars fans could have told Disney straight up, like, hey, we don't want a continuation of the sequels, but Disney in their hubris wants to force the sequels down our throats and wants to solidify them as a legitimate piece of Star Wars media, which they are. I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, retcon the sequels, those aren't real Star Wars. I don't like them, but I think that's a bit extreme. But I think this is a huge indication that the Rey movie is probably not happening the way it was initially announced. It might be part of Simon Kinberg's trilogy that he's working on. It may pop up somewhere else, but I don't think Rey is going to get that standalone movie that they first announced back in 2023. Regardless, let's move on to the next Star Wars movie that we will be seeing in theaters next year, which is The Mandalorian and Grogu, still the worst Star Wars movie name ever, but we know that that name was created by a marketing team that said, we need to have big names that people know, and we need every single Star Wars project to be named after the main character of that project, or else people won't know what it's about. We didn't get much of Mandalorian and Grogu outside of the people who were at the panels at Star Wars Celebration because as of today, June 2nd, 2025, we still have not seen the trailer that they showed in the panel, and I have a little rant for that in a bit, but I do just want to touch on maybe some of the new details that we learned about, which was Sigourney Weaver is one of the leading characters. She is a New Republic pilot or commander to some degree, and she's hiring Mando and Grogu to go out on a mission. We don't hear much about that mission, but we can guess that it's involved with the Imperial Remnant, maybe Thrawn coming back. You know, Mando by the end of this movie will run into Thrawn, and that'll be the big setup for what's to come. And coming along on that mission, it seems, is Zeb Orrelios from Star Wars Rebels, which is really exciting. I love how Dave Filoni has snuck all of his Rebels characters into live action at this point. I'm not sure if they announced that the voice actor will be returning to voice Zeb, because obviously Zeb is a big CGI alien. They could bring the voice actor back for that role, but I don't know if that's been announced yet. And we saw some blurry screenshots of Rado the Hutt, the same Hutt that we saw in the animated Clone Wars movie back in 2008. I never thought that sitting in that theater, I would see this baby Hutt turn into Jeremy Allen White almost 15, 20 years later in a Star Wars movie. But here we are. He looks jacked, makes sense. I think it is a cool concept to see Rado take up the helm of the Hutt Syndicate after the power vacuum was left when Jabba the Hutt was strangled by Leia. I think there's a lot of interesting tidbits that they could draw from to discuss the creation of the First Order, because we know that the First Order used the underworld to move supplies, to raise funds, to build up in the shadows. So I think there is some tie-ins that they could do here with the sequel trilogy. Not that I need that, I'm just trying to theory craft. I would rather this movie be very standalone, but we know it's not going to be. And Pedro Pascal was there in some of the craziest outfits I've ever seen, but he's Pedro Pascal, so he can somehow pull it off. And that's pretty much all we got. And this is where I'm going to insert my Star Wars Celebration rant, which I've had to make for the past 2 celebrations. Essentially, it boils down to this. Star Wars Celebration used to release the trailers, or at least most of them, to the general public within the same week as Star Wars Celebration. It wasn't just an event at Star Wars Celebration, it was a global event celebrating Star Wars and all of the Star Wars fans coming together to discuss the newest announcements and the newest footage that we've been seeing. But recently, at not just Celebration, but also at D23, Disney has decided to not release anything that they show at these conventions to the broader fan base within a realistic time period. I feel like the Acolyte trailer that we saw a month before release was shown at D23 almost a half a year before that. And I find this decision to be so puzzling because they're missing out on such a huge opportunity to capitalize on all of the eyes being on Star Wars, both Star Wars fans and non-Star Wars fans, because it's all over Twitter, it's all over social media, and Star Wars needs as much hype as it can get right now because it is in a very fragile state. Now, as someone who's been to a bunch of celebrations, I also totally empathize with the idea that if you go to Celebration, you're spending a lot of money, you're staying in hotels, you're waiting in very long queues to get into these exclusive panels. You should get exclusive looks at these new projects. In 2017, when I went to Celebration Orlando and I waited in line on the cold concrete floor at 3 a.m. to see the Last Jedi panel, and when I left that panel, I realized that the teaser that they showed to us was released to the public at the exact same time. I felt slighted. I was a bit upset that I had done all of this work and spent all this money to make it to Celebration, and I didn't get anything exclusive out of it other than the poster that they gave us. So I don't fully support the idea of dropping the trailer exactly at the same time as the panel. But I do think that it should drop within the week or the month of the panel because all the hype just kind of dissipates and you end up having a bunch of Star Wars fans who have to watch the trailer through these really grainy videos on iPhone. You hear about everything that happens in the trailer through articles. You see bad screenshots, and it's just like all that excitement and all that surprise is kind of watered down because you're not experiencing it the way they intended. And of course, they'll end up dropping this trailer on a random Tuesday with an Entertainment Weekly article, and that excitement just isn't the same as it dropping during Star Wars Celebration when everyone's talking about Star Wars. So I think moving forward, my solution is what they used to do, which is show the trailer to the people in the room and then release it to the public shortly thereafter. But the people in the room get the exclusive poster. They get to see some scenes from the show. They get to hear a more in-depth conversation with the creators that isn't live streamed. You see concept art. You get more inside looks into whatever the project is that maybe the outside world doesn't. But I think trailers should be available to everyone. When I went to the Mandalorian panel in 2019, the first panel for Mandalorian ever, where they'd be showing the first footage, they showed us an exclusive look at the first scene of the show. That wasn't released to anyone else, but I believe they released a trailer to everyone else. And I think that's the best way to move forward. And I hope they make this change for other conventions, but I have no idea if they will. I just had to say my piece on it because as someone who's lived both lives of being at Celebration and feeling slighted, but also sitting at home watching the live stream and them never showing any of the footage that all these people at Celebration are talking about. That's it. Rant over. I don't have much else to say about The Mandalorian and Grogu. I think my biggest takeaway was just seeing Dave Filoni and Pedro Pascal on the Star Wars live stage together. I still feel so weird about seeing the biggest movie star on the planet sitting next to the weird wolf cowboy hat guy that I used to look up to when I was 10 years old watching the Clone Wars movie or watching Clone Wars on Cartoon Network week to week. He used to be like this secret, Dave Filoni, and now he's kind of in the eye of everyone in the entertainment industry that knows about Star Wars and has gotten a lot of criticism. But to me, he's still that secret storyteller in Star Wars, and just seeing him next to Pedro Pascal always kind of takes me out of it. I think people also forget that Pedro Pascal at the beginning of The Mandalorian was relatively unknown. I think everyone was like, oh yeah, that's Oberyn from Game of Thrones, and sometimes they wouldn't even know what the Game of Thrones character's name was. They would just be like, oh yeah, that was that guy that got killed by the mountain. And now, since then, he's just absolutely exploded. Moving on to the animated space, which is my bread and butter. You guys know how much I love and respect Star Wars animation as a medium for storytelling. Even if I haven't been the biggest fan of the Tales series, and I obviously have never seen Resistance, I still think it is the strongest medium for storytelling in Star Wars. And this celebration, we got some big announcements in animation, one being Maul Shadow Lord, the next animated series, which is coming out in 2026. This was a huge shock to me because I didn't think they would ever give Maul an entire show. I still don't know if he's a character that can carry a show by himself. But I do think this is really exciting because I've been an advocate for Star Wars animation to really lean into the more mature, darker side of the animated storytelling that they've done. I feel Bad Batch did a great job in some aspects of the show, but overall, it felt so tonally all over the place because you'd have these super deep, mature episodes about Crosshair and Cody and their psychology of being tools of a war machine that they don't believe in. But then we jump back to a silly adventure of the week with Omega and the rest of the Bad Batch. I really wanted that show to focus up, and ultimately it did in season 3, but I just think it was a little bit too little too late. With Maul, I would be pretty shocked to see an Adventure of the Week style show where there is a lighter tone and it would be more focused on kids. I really think with this announcement, they are putting their foot down and saying we are committing to a more mature animated story, which gets me super excited. I think that there have been some hints at this, obviously with the Bad Batch, but I've also seen a lot more blood being animated in the Tales series, and I forget if there was any in the Bad Batch, but people may say that's insignificant, but I think it was a big sign that they were headed towards a more mature story because we hadn't really seen blood animated in the Clone Wars, and we definitely didn't see it in Rebels, even though there was a lot of ultra-violent things hinted at. They were shown off-screen typically. So in that respect, I'm very excited. On the other hand, as I mentioned, I do think Maul is a very interesting character to have as a main protagonist for an entire show because I do think he is much stronger as a supporting character, as someone to be an antagonist to our much more rounded main characters. This sounds like I'm shitting on Maul or saying that Maul isn't a strong character. He absolutely is. What they did with him in Clone Wars and Rebels is a revelation of bringing him back to life and making him this great of a character. But I do think his strength is as a supporting character. Sam Witwer is fully involved. He is voicing Maul. He seems to be very much involved in the conversations about the stories they want to tell with him. And he has said that Maul is a much more deep character than we've seen before in this show. We're going to see a more human side of him. And I believe, Sam, he is so committed to Star Wars. He's an encyclopedia. I totally trust him when he says that. But I still do believe that there might be some growing pains with seeing Maul in a different light if it isn't done in the correct way. It might feel forced. It might not feel forced. But I'm going in with cautious optimism about this aspect of the show. They, of course, showed a trailer that none of us have seen yet, so we don't have much else to go off of. We know that he does recruit some sort of Twi'lek apprentice that a lot of people are saying is Darth Talon, which is pretty cool. I'm not into Legends that deeply. I haven't encountered this character before, and I'm not even saying it is the same character, but a lot of people are excited about that aspect of the show. I think the side characters are going to have to be very strong with Maul as the protagonist to really even out the show as a whole. I know some people are saying, well, Maul was the main character of a lot of arcs in the Clone Wars. You know, he's done this before. Why can't he carry a show? And again, I think ultimately those arcs that he was the main character in were great because they were contained, and then they ultimately paid off with our main protagonist going up against him. And that conflict between them is what brought out the best side of Maul. I wish I had more to discuss here. I'm sure I will make a video when the first trailer drops for this series. It'll probably happen in a year because they love hiding trailers at this point. But as of right now, I'm definitely really intrigued about this prospect. Next up, we have the announcement of Star Wars Visions Volume 3 dropping this fall, 2025, which is super exciting. And then they also announced that the Ninth Jedi from the first volume is not only getting a follow-up in Volume 3, but is also getting a full spin-off series, I think it's a limited series, following those same characters. And it's going under this banner of Star Wars Visions Presents, which means that there's a lot more opportunity, if this does well, to tell more of these long-form stories within the Star Wars Vision brand. And I've mentioned this in my previous episodes talking about this, that these stories are so strong and there's so much love and care put into these shorts that these creators deserve to tell longer form stories in Star Wars. The director of Ninth Jedi, after Volume 1 released, even said, I have mapped out an entire movie for this story. Please let me make it. And I'm so happy we're sitting here today knowing that we are going to get that full story. And I'm so excited to see that come to life. For Volume 3, based on all the studios that they announced, they are going back to the all-anime format that we saw in Volume 1. We have some super heavy hitters here with Production IG, Trigger, Kinema Citrus, who did The Village Bride. If you haven't seen my episode on Village Bride, go check that out. It's one of my favorite Star Wars stories ever. And then Wit Studio, who has told two of my favorite stories ever, Vinland Saga and Attack on Titan, at least the first couple seasons of each of those shows. I am so excited to see what they do with Star Wars. I don't think they were in Volume 1. But yeah, Visions, as I've talked about at length, I think is one of the strongest pieces of Star Wars storytelling that we've had under Disney. I think there is so much care and love put into these shorts, and in such a short amount of time, they capture the essence of Star Wars so well, more than most of the other projects that we've gotten from Disney. And I'm excited that I recorded this later because as of recording this, when I go through the articles discussing Visions, we see that they are continuing more stories than just the Ninth Jedi. Village Bride is getting a follow-up. We're getting a follow-up to Ronin, it looks like. So all this news really shoots Volume 3 up to my most anticipated list for Star Wars moving forward because I cannot wait to see F again from The Village Bride and see her follow-up story because I love the breadcrumbs that they laid in The Village Bride and where they could potentially go. And I don't want to see too much about the synopsis. I think they released what the synopsis is for her short, but I don't want to know it. I want to go in blind. I can't wait, and I hope I can make another full video essay on just that episode of Visions Volume 3. So yeah, I cannot wait till this releases this fall. Next up, let's move to the Star Wars video game space, which is very much in the zeitgeist right now with Star Wars Battlefront 2 seeing the highest concurrent player count in a very long time. There's been a huge push for DICE and EA to make a Battlefront 3. I don't think that will happen. DICE is very much committed to Battlefield moving forward, and I don't know if another studio could really accomplish what DICE did with Battlefront 1 and 2, even though those are very flawed games, and I think there's a lot of rose-tinted glasses around the discussion with Battlefront 1 and 2. If you were there when they both released, if you were there for all of the waiting and updates, you know that those games were not at their best when they released. Battlefront 2 was a huge scandal because of the loot boxes, because you couldn't play as Vader at launch. You had to spend like 60 hours playing just to buy Vader himself. Battlefront 1 only had the Galactic Empire and Rebels fighting. You didn't have Clone Wars content. It was so bare bones. I really enjoyed those games. I have a lot of great memories with those games, but let's be realistic about what they were and the issues that were present when they released. Regardless, though, Star Wars video games have been in a very rocky place for a long time now. Star Wars Outlaws was a flop. I enjoyed my time with that game, but it was extremely shallow. I thought it could have been much better, much deeper, but it ended up being a run-of-the-mill Ubisoft game. Jedi Survivor, Jedi Fallen Order are obviously fantastic from a storytelling perspective, but those games released in not the best states performance-wise. A lot of people had issues running Jedi Survivor. I know the frame rates for me in Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor were pretty rough at some point. But the story really carried those. And then other than that, we haven't gotten much in the video game space for Star Wars, which is really sad to say. So let's talk about Star Wars Zero Company, the next big Star Wars game, which is from Bit Reactor in collaboration with Respawn Entertainment, who did Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor. This is a real-time strategy, top-down type turn-based game that I have no experience with. I haven't played these type of games before. The only thing I can really relate to is Empire at War, which was a huge grand scale battle simulator. This is a much more intimate, smaller scale battle game. But the studio behind this is BitReactor, who created the SOCOM games, which I haven't played, but everyone who has played them says they are absolutely fantastic. So we know that we are getting a studio who's at the top of their game in this genre of gaming, which is exciting. And then Respawn is on board to assist with the story of the game, which obviously they've proven to be fantastic Star Wars storytellers. So I think there's a really great marriage of talent for this game. And I'm excited to just try a new genre of gaming, and I hope it opens me up to try more of these style of games. The other exciting aspect of this game is that it does take place during the Clone Wars, and this is the more covert side of the Clone Wars. Of course, there's a piece of me that wishes we were getting large-scale battles and stuff like Empire at War, but the way they describe it, it's very much boots on the ground, Andor-style spy thriller missions that we're going to be taking part in, which is very exciting. They specifically cited Andor as an inspiration for this story, and I think that's going to lend itself to a more mature story. I think it'll be a great way to explore the Clone Wars from a different angle. The Clone Wars series, I love it. There's definitely aspects of it where it gets super dark and it has some real-world situations and themes, but I do think there is an air of levity to some of the Clone Wars big battles, like the Battle of Geonosis, that I think this show could bring that Andor lens to, and I think that's really exciting moving forward. They've also mentioned that the game has permanent consequences, at least on some difficulty levels, so if your squad mates die, they kind of die for real, and that brings me to like a Mass Effect type storyline, which is so exciting because I played the Mass Effect trilogy, the remaster of it, a couple summers ago, and I was just so enthralled with the decision making and with the real consequences that happen if you do fail, or even when you make the right choices, you still lose teammates. So I like that you can kind of craft your own story if they follow through on this promise. It's also a really interesting crew of characters. We have a Mandalorian, we have some sort of clone who defected to a degree, we have a Two Tubes species Jedi Padawan, it looks like. We have an Umbaran, and then we also have the leader of the crew, Hawks, who is fully customizable. So in the trailers, he's a guy, but I believe you can make him an alien, you can make him a woman, you can change him up however you like, and he's essentially the main commander of this fighting force. And I think I'll reference Mass Effect again. We'll have some loyalty missions, or we'll have some missions where you have to work together and have certain teammates rely on each other, and that will build up their chemistry and will maybe make you a stronger squad as a whole, and we'll get a lot of cool story details about their backgrounds and so forth and so on. They've also mentioned that, you can have these main party members, but then you could also customize the whole group however you like. So you could have like a full group of astromech droids, which they said is fun, but probably not the most pragmatic way to go about these missions. But I think the big takeaway here is that player choice seems to be at the forefront, and that's what makes the most successful games beloved. So they're saying all the right things for me here, even though it's a game genre that I haven't had much experience with. I think the talent's there, I think the story is there, and overall, I'm really excited for it. I want Star Wars video games to get back to where they were in the golden age. I want Star Wars video games to bring in non-Star Wars fans, and I just want things to be good for Star Wars across the board, from TV to movies to video games. Now, before I get into the books and the manga that were announced, I do want to quickly touch on the Ahsoka panel. It wasn't exactly a Season 2 panel, but we did get some more details about what's to come in the story. We got our first look at Baylan Skoll being portrayed by a new actor, the actor who played the Hound in Game of Thrones. I believe that he was friends with Ray Stevenson, rest in peace, while he was alive, and that they might have discussed Baylan Skoll in this role previously, and so that means that he might have some insights into Baylan that other actors might not, which is really cool. And he looks really good in the costume from the screenshot that I saw. He obviously brings that imposing figure to the character, but I hope he can bring that grace and that elegance that Baylan brought to him, that refinement of a knight. I think that's super important to the character. Other than that, Dave Filoni promised that we'd be seeing a war on two fronts. We would see a galactic war in the known galaxy between Thrawn and the New Republic, and then we'd also have the Peridia storyline with Sabine and Ahsoka and likely Anakin training and going against Shin and the Marauders that she seems to have taken over on the planet, as well as chasing after Balin as he tries to uncover the secrets of the Mortis gods. It's a lot of promises, and I don't think season 1 delivered like it should have. I know Dave Filoni, this was his first show-running gig in live action, where he's the showrunner and the writer, but I think it missed the mark in a lot of aspects. I don't agree with the decision to make Sabine a Jedi, to make her a Force user. I just don't think that was what the character was built up to be in Rebels. I think the pacing at the beginning of the season was a bit slow. There was a lot of conveniences, and then it kind of ended with a very convenient wrap-up where Thrawn was made to seem like this super genius tactical mastermind, but he really wasn't that smart in that entire situation. So I don't think they stuck the landing. I thought the World Between Worlds episode was great. I thought the episode where Sabine hands over the map was great. But other than that, I think it was underwhelming for me. I hope season 2 can deliver on these promises, but it is a TV show, so when you promise a large-scale war on two fronts, that sounds very difficult to juggle, especially across 8 episodes on a TV show budget. Even Andor, with its massive budget, was really more a small, contained story. So I'm not sure they can deliver on these big promises, but the small footage that I saw was this cool 1940s, 50s infomercial type trailer where they had concept art from season 2. There was a lot of cool things like Hu Yang with like 4 lightsabers like General Grievous. There were these really weird big mechs that Ahsoka and Sabine were fighting. And yeah, concept art is going to look really cool. Can they deliver? I don't know. But I just wanted to discuss that a little bit because there was some new information around Ahsoka. Last up, I want to talk about some of the book and manga news that we got. We got some cool adaptations of popular books in canon. Thrawn is getting a manga adaptation. Fallen Order is getting a manga adaptation. That looks really cool. I want them to do standalone original stories in the manga medium. They've done a lot of adaptations, but I want them to try their hand at a long-running manga Star Wars series that's all original. I think that would be really, really cool. And then on the book front, The High Republic is finally coming to an end in a couple days. We're only a couple weeks away from Trials of the Jedi. I can't believe that The High Republic is ending. I already have my special edition hardcover ordered, and it's going to be in the mail soon. I will be giving you my review on that. But we saw the cover reveal, I believe, at Star Wars Celebration. It's fantastic. The colors are great. I hope it lives up to the hype. Charles Soule is writing. He wrote Light of the Jedi, one of my favorite Star Wars novels and favorite Star Wars stories. I hope he wraps this up in a really great way. And then another really cool announcement we got was a new Darth Vader-centered novel. It's called Master of Evil. It is this horrific cover. It's releasing around Halloween, which kind of makes sense why they would go with this cover, but it's exploring this story of Darth Vader looking for the secrets of the Force related to life and death. You know, he failed Padme, so maybe he's looking for the secrets that he didn't get from Palpatine. Maybe he's looking for a way to revive her. I'm not sure, but it seems like a really interesting concept. I have not read the Darth Vader comics, so if that is discussed in there, I don't know if this is rehashing that or if it's a brand new story. It is written by Adam Christopher, who has done a couple other Star Wars novels to good critical reception. I am excited to pick this up. This is a story I am super interested in, especially this era of Vader between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. So definitely excited to dive into this when it does finally release. And yeah, that pretty much wraps up all my thoughts on all of the big announcements for Star Wars Celebration. If I missed anything that you're excited about, let me know in the comments below. Let me know what of these announcements you're most excited for. I think this is a very interesting time period for Star Wars, with not a lot of live action TV being greenlit, a lot of things ending, and a lot of new exciting things coming around the corner. As always, I'm cautiously optimistic, but I'm always rooting for Star Wars. I always want it to be great. So I hope a lot of these projects end up delivering on all the promises they're making. And I can't wait for next celebration. I hope to be there in person and bring you all along for that ride and journey. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're listening to this on a podcast platform. Leave a review, hit the notification bell. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, you can follow me at @star_wars_mark of balance. Thank you guys so much for all the love and the support. I appreciate you. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, and may the Force be with you. Peace.